Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A11 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I will tell you about the Samsung Galaxy A11 is that this was a pretty big budget phone of 2020. So when this phone first came out, you have to remember that this was not supposed to be a competitor against the Galaxy S20. It was not supposed to be any big, massive, phone. It was supposed to be like a cheap budget phone that Samsung was making. We've already seen many successors against these particular devices. We've seen devices like the, Samsung Galaxy A15, the A25s, so many other phones across the board that are probably better overall than this one. So I will tell you, when it comes down to it, this device, for a lot of people, it probably is not worth buying, and I probably would not recommend buying this device anymore. But there are many other phones I would recommend buying, which are linked down in the description. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, beyond that, on the front of this particular phone, you are getting a 6.4-inch PLS LCD panel. So this was at the time like a pretty basic type of device. This was not like this was not a great phone or anything like that. This was a very, very basic panel at this point, which I think is really nice. I think this in and of itself is a very, very cool thing, but it is a very cheap device, and it's a very cheap panel when it comes down to it as well. So this in and of itself was something that was a very, very big thing to keep in mind. And once again, I would hate for you to go and buy this phone if you expect this thing to be like a great performing panel, and it is not a good performing panel anymore. It doesn't get that bright. It's a 60Hz panel. Definitely not that great. 720p, it's a pretty basic, but it's worse than the iPhone XR panel. So I really would not recommend buying this phone from that perspective, and just from the display alone. But for a cheap budget phone of 2020, it is actually not that bad of a display. Even with a hole punch display, it's actually pretty impressive. On the bottom, you're getting a USB Type-C port, which is actually pretty, awesome. I love seeing that here. You're getting the standard type of build quality. It's completely built out of plastic. So with this type of phone, if you're planning on buying it, it is 100% built out of plastic here. And this in and of itself is probably one of those other things you're going to have to keep in mind. If you're buying a phone like the Samsung Galaxy A11, these types of devices are just giving you a very somewhat watered down experience. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and buy these types of phones because, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense, to be honest, because the build quality just is so poor. So beyond that, you're still getting a camera on the backside. You're getting a fingerprint sensor on the backside as well. And, it's not a terrible feeling phone, but for the price, it's not that bad. But when you start comparing this phone against even today's budget phones are significantly better, giving you 90 Hz panels plus. Those are definitely way better displays than this one. But some big things that this phone is missing out on that a lot of phones have nowadays: 1, glass backs. That's a pretty common thing you'd get on a lot of phones. 2, no IP certification on this phone and no water resistance. So if you're planning on buying this phone is going to be missing out on those 2 things. And there's no wireless charging or reverse wireless charging either. So if you're buying this phone, you're already going to be missing out on those 2 things here in and of itself, which is another pretty big downside too. So if you're planning on buying these types of devices, those are some very, very big things that you're going to be missing out on. And I would hate for you to go and buy this phone if you're already going to be missing out on those type of things. So take it as you will, but that kind of covers it up, from that particular perspective on the outside. Price tag wise, this phone, as you may already have expected, it's still being, it's not being sold anymore. And this thing, there's not really any prices that you can find for this thing right now, but in the used market, you could probably find it for $50, probably even cheaper than that. So that in and of itself, again, is another big thing to keep in mind here too. So for those things, that kind of covers it up on the exterior. In terms of the camera side of things, as you probably would have expected, this phone right now is giving you a triple camera setup on the backside. So, it's a pretty basic type of camera as you probably would have expected. So it's a 13 megapixel wide angle lens, 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, then a 2 megapixel depth lens. So with this type of camera, for the most part, as you probably would have expected, it is a pretty basic type of camera that you probably get for the most part. And again, that's just kind of what happens when you're getting these types of devices. You are getting these types of phones that are a little bit older that are probably just not going to be giving you that great of a camera when it comes down to it. So with this type of phone, you're getting 1080p at 30 frames per second on the backside, and on the front, you're getting 1080p at 30 as well. So these types of phones really are not giving you that great of an experience in terms of the camera side, especially, and this is the craziest thing, especially inside of those social media applications. Inside of those social media apps, these phones are going to be giving you very, very, very limited type of experience, and they're not going to be that great. And I would hate for you to go and buy a phone like this if it's going to be giving you a very, very watered down experience. So I'm letting you all know right now, this is a very limited type of device, it's not going to be that great. And the camera just really isn't going to be that great when it comes down to it. So take it as you will, but that's just one of those other things to kind of keep in mind here. Go ahead and grab a better phone that's going to be giving you a better experience, because this one is not going to be giving you that good of an experience when it comes down to it. But it's still a camera, it still takes photos and videos. So if those things are big to you and important to you, then you have that capability. Otherwise, I probably would not recommend buying this phone when it comes down to it. So that in and of itself kind of covers it up here too. Now beyond that, another big thing with this particular device is the fact that this phone, was supported with software for a little bit of time, but it's really not supported with software anymore. So this in and of itself is another one of those things to keep in mind, because if you're buying this phone, you need to definitely go ahead and buy a phone that's still going to be supported with software that has a future ahead of it. And with this particular device, it really is not going to be giving you that. Like, it's already not supported with software. And once again, I would hate for you to go and buy a phone if it's already going to be limited, and this type of device is basically going to be, giving you that type of experience. So that in and of itself, once again, is just another one of those things to kind of keep in mind there too. But I will say there's a lot of phones that are not that much more expensive than this thing, or that are probably even cheaper than this phone, that are significantly better than this device. And I would recommend buying those types of phones rather than this particular device. So that kind of covers it up there too. Performance wise, this phone is giving you that Qualcomm Snapdragon 450 chipset inside. Keep that in mind, with 2 or 3 or 4 gigabytes of RAM. That is a very limited type of experience and very limited type of, chipsets and everything to have inside of a phone like this. That in and of itself, I will tell you, could be one of the biggest downsides of buying this type of phone. It is a phone that turns on, it can make calls, and it can take messages and things like that. But if you're trying to go through and actually use this phone on an everyday basis, you already know, and you can probably tell that this is going to be a very limited type of device when it comes down to it. Like, this type of phone is giving you a very limited type of experience in almost every single way. And that's exactly what's going on when you're getting a device like this. You are much better off, as you probably would have expected. You are much better off buying a phone that's still going to be giving you a better experience in almost every single way. And with this type of phone, the performance is just so lackluster. So with that being said, it just doesn't make any sense to go and buy a phone like this. You are, like I said before, significantly better off buying phones that are going to be better in most ways, and this one is pretty much not going to be better in that way. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind, and I would hate for you to go and buy a phone like this if it's already going to be outdated, or you're going to be getting like a very poor performing phone. So to sum it up, what I'll definitely tell you, I don't really think the Samsung Galaxy A11 is worth buying anymore. You are much better off, like I mentioned before, you are much better off buying phones that are still supported with software, that still have some capability and a future ahead of them. And with this type of device, there's not only a future ahead of it, like I don't see a future ahead of these devices, but they're just cheap phones that came out many years ago that are pretty much only supposed to be, used for like a year or two after they are initially coming out. So now I would only recommend buying the A13 or newer. With these ones, the A11s, I would not recommend buying them because they are significantly older, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to go and buy these phones when it comes down to it. So that in and of itself kind of covers it up here for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.